He has not just built the gateway, he opened up the floodgates for Indian Fintech. I would like to introduce the man himself, Vishnu Acharya. Welcome to the show.
I've always had a fire in my belly to do something big. And I started out on my own in food tech in the early days because I love food. Hi, my name is Vishnu Acharya and I'm very excited to be featured on
I've always been that underdog because I've always wanted to aim very high, but then I've, landed just a little below it, never getting what I always wanted. So I kept fighting.
80% of the capital still comes from let's say VCs or LPs from abroad. When you see that individual coming in with that sense of excitement and he's approaching you for the first time for funds to go ahead and figure things out.
When I meet a founder, I'm usually playing the lens of an investor, but in my heart, I'm not rooting for the founder as an investor. I'm rooting for the founder as someone who's faced some of those obstacles when I was building out, and I can only imagine 10% of what that founder is going to face on a daily basis.
What's your reaction when you end up seeing a pitch which is completely AI generated and you hear all these wonderful little buzzwords?
India has also become one of the largest pools of STEM engineers. And because we have so many engineers, we don't need AI researchers, we need AI engineers, and just upskilling will create a powerhouse here.
What are your thoughts as far as the Indian AI mission is concerned? Well, he made payments painless, startups solvent, and gave a reason for banks to stay up at night. He has not just built the gateway, he opened up the floodgates for Indian Fintech. I would like to introduce the man himself, Vishnu Acharya. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It is a true pleasure. How are you doing?
Good. I'm
Wonderful.
doing good. Very happy to be here.
And so am I that you're here because there's just so many things that I would like for you to shed light on. But we'll start off with this. You started off as a developer. Food has been your passion. Still is.
Yeah, still is.
And then you eventually obviously became the big man, the Razorpay deal maker and all of that. Where did the journey would genuinely kick off from, Vishnu? I mean, let's start from the start.
Yeah.
It's always a good place to
Absolutely.
start. So what inspired Vishnu Acharya to make sure that this is the path I would like to follow?
Yeah, so I think early on, most things didn't come very easy. I come from a very, very hardworking family, very well-to-do doctors in Bombay. So very inspiring in terms of, just work ethic and diligence. And that always, was set in my mind. But when I was building my own career, I think there were some deep questions because as a young student, as a young, adult in your career, you always
Were you a brilliant
glamorized.
student though?
I always wanted to be. At times, I really was. So till 10th standard, I was great.
Nice.
Then Bombay,
I see your
Dazzle hit
pain.
me.
I see your pain.
Then Bombay hit me, and then I went down and up.
Right.
I was great again in my B school. So it's been up and down, broadly good. But I think I've always been that underdog because I've always wanted to aim very high, but then I've landed just a little below it, never getting what I always wanted. So I kept fighting. I think that spirit, that's what's kept me going, and it keeps me going today as well. It's just that the ambitions and what you're aiming for changes every year, but the approach remains the same. So over the course of the years, it was first college and then starting out on my own, that not working out to the extent I wanted it to, then finding two of the most phenomenal entrepreneurs I've seen, which is the Razorpay founders, joining them early on, and then doing the same for Razorpay with Razorpay. So yeah, that's the journey and how it's played out.
It's fun, and I think a couple of the takeaways that I got from that is it's fun to be the underdog, I guess.
Absolutely.
And it's that that punch that nobody sees coming.
Absolutely, and I think it's even more fun when you own it, and that's what you are.
Yeah, that makes a little difference.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned earlier, Vishnu, about the fact that there are so many founders that you meet, or there's so many people who are looking up to you at some level or the other for them to realize their dreams, etc. I'd like for you to maybe think back and tell me this, which is that one conversation or that one meeting or whatever that just changed your outlook completely.
Yeah. It's a tricky one because I meet so many people who are smarter than me every day.
I wouldn't know about that, but yeah.
But so there's this one time founder told me, "Hey Vishnu, I don't need you to believe in my idea. I just need you to believe in the fact that I will never quit on it." And honestly,
Nice.
we didn't end up investing in the founder or anything, and it was just a regular pass. But a couple of years later, the founder built a phenomenal outcome, and then that got me thinking about how I calibrate ambition. I don't think it's about large market sizes or jazzy pitches. It's sometimes just to do with really resilient and patient founders.
Just
So
being
just
great.
just I think that is when I realized that sometimes it's just not the smartest pitches or decks. It's like the strongest spine, and so I look out for that a little bit more now, and I also try to instill that in myself a little bit.
That's nice because I mean it's also relevant given the fact that you just talked about grit and patience and things like that. Given probably the way the startup ecosystem at this given point in time is, Vishnu, and I think that's a wonderful little segue into that. A
Yeah.
lot of startups are unfortunately
Yeah.
shutting down.
Yeah.
So do you see it as just plain not being gritty or patient, or is there something off according to you?
Yeah, look, I think the world is very different today, right? Unlike 10 years back, today you have the power of AI, because of which just building out is 1/10 easier or
Correct.
10x easier. So instead of needing 10 engineers, you need one vibe coding tool and you can build your first MVP and take it to market, which means because the cost of starting up is so low, you're going to have a lot more people starting up. And because of that, just more failures, and that's bound to happen. And it's actually a good thing because your cycles of learning are shortened now. You don't have to wait to hire people, build
Interesting,
it, take
true.
it to market. So I think that's one theme that's definitely playing out. The second is that today the rate of change in the world has become 10x of 10 years back.
True.
I'll give you a simple data point. I think the amount of data that we captured over the last 1 year or half a year is more than the data we captured over the last decade.
Wow.
And that's because of how fast we're processing data, again, AI, but
Correct.
also compute and other things.
Correct.
And that rate of change, I think, creates a lot of noise, because of which now it's even trickier to cut through it and assimilate models. So because of these two broad meta reasons, I think you do see a lot more startups, but a lot more failures as well.
As well, right.
Honestly, that's not a bad thing. I think it's actually great.
There is this maybe narrative, since we are, of course, talking about startups, etc. I'd really want your insight on this aspect. There is this constant little narrative or chatter which is all the time going on that founders get frustrated about the fact that when they're pitching their ideas or things like that, maybe people who are funding them are essentially always maybe somewhere reticent about really going the whole hog. Why do you feel that is? I mean, is there something wrong with probably the environment at this given point in time? Is it a trust issue? What is it?
I think there are two parts to it, right? I think there are some categories where it's inherently hard to, make constant investments, because those categories just take a lot longer to create returns. There's a long gestation period. So those categories, I think, this outcome is largely because we've not seen a lot of successes because it just takes time. So take categories like, space tech, defense tech.
Sure.
Some of these, it just takes 10 years, 5 years to just get a product out there and get real revenues. So those categories, actually, this is the way the world will work. But what we need is at least a small group of people to come in and build that conviction and have that patience of playing the long game. And we do actually have that coming up in India. So there are companies like Bellatrix and Digantra and Pixel, all in space, defense, getting real money from companies like Boeing in the US. But they've taken 7-8 years to do it. So it's not like in a year or in half a year, you start getting traction like in other categories. So that's one thing. The second is in other categories, I think honestly, you will always hear this because there's always more founders than investors. And that balance is always going to be a tricky one for the universe to, manifest. So,
But we are all working towards
yeah,
that,
but I
I'm
think
sure.
everyone's working towards that one. So, yeah.
Talking about the fact that you just mentioned as far as the investor network or the ecosystem in India is concerned, how would you probably want to differentiate between, let's say, institutional funding vis-a-vis individual funding? And where does it stand today? Where do you see it in terms of the next 5 years or the next 10 years?
I think there's been a significant change in the last 10 years, and that will be even more so in the next 10. And let me tell you why. Historically, it was, if you go 10 years back, there was not too much of a VC ecosystem. Or 15 years back, there were like 2 VCs. Today, there are probably 200 VCs, right? Now, I don't know if that'll become 2,000, But those 200 will maybe become 400, and those 400 will have a lot more capital in the next 10 years to deploy. Reason being, 10 years back, there were no wins and outcomes. Today, we have, a lot more tech companies gone public. A lot of investors have made returns. So people are seeing that, there is money to be made in tech. And so from across the world, people want to actually invest in India. India is almost on every large endowment funds and big investors checklist that I need money, and exposure to India and tech. So that's going to attract more funding and hence VCs. But you asked another question that beyond VCs, who are these other individual angels? That's an interesting one. Where do angels come? They largely come from either wealthy families who have money and a generation is suddenly aware of tech and wants to invest, or an individual who has made their own money quickly in tech and feels like I want to give back. There are a few other categories, but these are the two broad buckets. So in India, we're seeing a lot of wealthy families have their second gens come into position and now actually deploying family money into tech. And secondly, because of so many large startups like Flipkart and PhonePe, Razorpay itself, Amazon, others, there's operators who've made money and now want to invest back. So while I say we do angel investing, there are thousands more who also do it. And I think both of this together lifts the ecosystem up.
So you feel that this is driving towards something which is going to be healthy and positive moving forward? Does that give a huge sort of a fillip to the
Absolutely.
Future founders or who are looking at realizing their
Absolutely.
dreams?
10 years back, there was probably two options. You find one or the two VCs or get a bank loan. Today, there are maybe 10 options. You go to a micro VC, you go to an angel, you go to a network, you come to something like this Llama Club, you go to a VC, corporate VC and venture debt. Few years out, there'll be 20 options and each of these options will have a lot more players. So yeah, I think it's going to definitely, go on upwards from here.
50 plus startups, Razorpay. I mean, and I'm sure it's growing. Why did you choose the institutional route? What was the thought behind that entire situation?
Yeah. We at Razorpay, all of us who are the core leadership founders, are all operators at the back, at the heart of it, right?
Correct.
We've built, we build, and while we obviously invest, because you inherently, while building, are investing capital to build your company, at heart you are trying to take an operational route to building. And when you do that, I think you learn a lot along the way. So as Razorpay as a company has learned a lot. So the question was, how do we actually share these learnings with founders who are going to take somewhat of a similar journey and hence maybe help them avoid mistakes we made? And that's the meta thesis. And the second is that Razorpay in itself is an ecosystem, it's a platform. So a lot of companies build on top of Razorpay. We provide a lot of fintech infra and APIs. That allows them to strengthen their value proposition. A mix of these two, convinced us that we should do institutional funding. And what we hear from founders is that we don't have ownership rights. We don't come with, mechanics of this is the entry valuation, exit valuation. We actually pull up our sleeves and help them get customers from our base. We help them with, tech APIs. So I think that's what makes founders also appreciate this a little bit more. And we only do it when they need it, not when we think they want it.
Vishnu, this is one thing which probably is 80% of the capital still comes from let's say VCs or LPs from abroad. Do you see that with things changing, maybe with the way the ecosystem is growing, do you feel that at some given point in time we will become independent as far as that raising of fund, etc. is concerned?
Yeah, look, I don't know if that's even an ideal goal, because at the end of the day,
Why is that though?
Because, at the end of the day, the money is always taken with an intent to return it eventually. And if you have clear path to return money, whether that's for a fund of funds, for a startup, for anyone, right? So like a trader, get money.
Sure.
If you have that path, why not accept capital and build large outcomes, uplift the ecosystem, the country, and then see where that takes you? But that having said, the contribution of domestic capital has significantly increased. So you're from Bombay, right? In Bombay, there is a lot of VCs and micro VCs whose LPs are not sitting in SF or New York. They're actually sitting in Surat and Chandigarh. And these are all families who've made great money with traditional businesses, they're real profitable businesses, and now want some exposure to the new age tech world. And they're actually now putting money into these micro VCs who are then subsequently putting it into startups, and the startups hiring employees. And then that's our domestic capital that's running the digital economy. So that's significantly increasing as well, though.
What's that conversation that you end up having, like you just mentioned a while back, regarding the fact that at the end of the day, you are developers at heart,
Yeah.
right? And when you see that individual coming in with that sense of excitement, and he's approaching you for the first time for funds to go ahead and figure things out. What are the things that you kind of look at, or very quietly gauge and understand and maybe see? Has that happened to you, that you've maybe seen a reflection of yourself in any of these
Yeah, absolutely.
meetings?
Look, I think when I meet a founder, I'm usually playing the lens of an investor, but in my heart, I'm not rooting for the founder as an investor. I'm rooting for the founder as someone who's faced some of those obstacles when I was building out, and I can only imagine 10% of what that founder is going to face on a daily basis. And that, I think, builds a lot of empathy when I'm kind of evaluating and trying to figure out if this is the right
That's a tough
partnership for
place,
us.
Vishnu, to be.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I think it's an interesting one, because I think it becomes a real partnership where if we get into it together, then I think there's a lot of non-linear outcomes that both can create. For us, maybe partnerships, returns; for them, whatever help we can provide.
Have there been moments? I want to stay on this a little more. Have there been moments where you have met founders? You thought they had all the right probably qualities and all of the right aspects and understandings, but you still didn't, like, you pulled your punch.
Yeah.
Did that happen to you? And in a way, then maybe you guided that person because you felt that, all right, wait a minute, this is somewhere a responsibility of yours, or do you think on those lines at all?
Absolutely. I think, and in M&A it happens a lot, but even in investing, a lot of times, because we as operators have been in a certain industry for a while, we do have a slightly better vantage point of what's happening in tech, in fintech, in AI, and hence are trying to constantly keep ourselves abreast of the latest. And when you're there, I think it's only your duty to impart some of that knowledge in whatever ways you can to someone who's building anything remotely relevant in that category, because that's the only way you will increase the overall chance of success of the ecosystem drop by drop as you meet each founder and give them that info. So absolutely try my best to impart some of that knowledge. Along the way, it's tricky because how
Has
much
it
of
ever backfired?
it absolutely does. So I always gauge, does this founder really want to know?
Yeah, correct.
I'm not going to go around with a mic, So I think the first question is, hey, do you really want to learn more, or do you want me to share what I have? And you can decide if that's relevant for you.
True.
Most good founders actually are open to it. And that's also a signal.
Yes.
Because for most founders, I think it's their job to read signals from their customers, from their employees, from their investors, and then it's their judgment whether they want to follow it or not. But at least hearing them out, I think, is a good signal for early stage founders, because they have to constantly evolve day on day.
It sounds like the fact that you are not too afraid to go ahead and fund, and you're not very skeptical about it. I'd like for you to share with us that one maybe story, which was where you said you'll back a founder no matter what, and and today when you think back, you were like, all right, wait a minute, this was a good decision I made.
Yeah.
And I backed my gut on this one.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share something like that with us.
Yeah, I won't take names, but
Fair.
there's a specific company that, was, it was in a very difficult market, very crowded market, but a phenomenal founder. The founder just told the story of his vision so well to me that I thought, hey, if you can say this to your customer, he's definitely going to buy a product, right? I'm investing. It's a lot higher stakes for me. And I believed in this founder. So I think, and so did the rest of our folks, and we ended up investing. I think a year out, there was nothing. Product wasn't built, there was challenges, market issues. A year and a half out, I think that's something, but not working out. And I think at the end of the day, sometimes you, especially at, not at Razorpay Ventures, when you're doing angel investments, it's a larger sum. So sometimes you don't know what's happening month on month, right? It's when the founder wants you, you kind of lean in.
Sure.
So you know what's happening. But then now, 3 years out, they've completely, sort of pivoted, and it's been like a pendulum oscillating from one end right to the other, where they're growing, they're profitable, they're generating cash. And it's just so good to see that. And honestly, like, there's nothing I'd attribute to any of us. It's all the founder, but we did have that conviction, and while it didn't play out in the shorter run, it did turn around in the longer run.
What are those moments like for you, Vishnu? Personally for you, when, for example, you've backed something and, like you said, a year and a half out, it's not working out, all of that is happening. What's it like for you there? What is going through your head?
Honestly, I think in our jobs, unfortunately or fortunately, you're constantly trying to refine your judgment, right? On categories, markets, founders, yourself, even. And when you're in that game, I think it's hard to zoom in and out and see what are the recurring patterns of why certain things went the right way and not. So I actively try to do that. And that's what gives me the kick. If I'm able to build out a pattern that, hey, these were X markets of people that
Very
we
interesting.
felt like, hey, we built conviction, it didn't work out. We built conviction and it worked out, and vice versa as well. Maybe we didn't build conviction and it was a great outcome. What are those patterns so that you actually build mental playbooks so you have a muscle memory to apply it, and that's I think how early stage investors
Very,
become
very interesting. Very interesting. Where which chapter has been written as far as the playbook
I
is
think till
concerned?
the end I'll always be at the start. Yeah, that's the underdog part. I don't think I'll ever be at the end. I'll have to keep looking forward and moving forward.
You obviously mentioned AI a while back. Um, what's your reaction when you end up seeing a pitch which is completely AI generated and you hear all these wonderful little buzzwords and all of that is happening?
Yeah.
So, what's your reaction to that?
I think beyond my wife, I almost talk more to ChatGPT after that. So personally, I'm constantly just speaking and interacting with various. To answer your question, look, I think in the AI world, it is fairly tricky because there's massive opportunity. I don't think anything like this is come in the hands of humans in terms of just superpowers in the last couple of decades, and how to utilize it is going to be a learning curve because of the rate of change that I previously mentioned. And so when I look at an opportunity in AI, honestly, I get excited at the heart of it. And then I try to figure out how do I cut the signal to noise by discovering what's really happening here, what's, often if it's an infra company, how what is it that they've built, what LLMs have they used, how are they training their data, how are they making their infra more efficient, what's their approach. Or if it's an application layer, I just try it out and see how it is. So usually excited. But I think the biggest blind spot is also, or the challenge is also, that AI itself is evolving. So,
Correct.
if you look 3 years back, a lot of startups who started out have completely pivoted because OpenAI, came and built it.
True.
And I'll tell you this most surprising element, which I think people don't realize. In any industry, take the largest player, take it in IT services, take it in healthcare, take it in software. The largest player is called the incumbent. And typically the assumption is the incumbent moves slow. So a startup will come and move fast and disrupt the incumbent and build a new business.
Sure.
In AI, the so-called incumbent, or the largest player, let's call it, which is OpenAI, has 3,500 employees. That's as much as the large incumbents here in the tech world. They're moving as fast as a 3-employee company. So in the world of AI, those rules don't exist.
Apply.
They don't apply. The rules have to be completely rewritten. And I think in this world, I think it's all for us to learn of how things will evolve.
As a developer, Vishnu, a lot of times, do you feel pained at the idea or at the thought of the fact that there are such wonderful minds in India, brilliant brains, but the simple narrative or thought, unfortunately, has been that a lot of them just move abroad. What is, according to you, lacking that is maybe taking away such wonderful minds?
I think this was also a very popular podcast question back in 2010. I'll tell you why. Because I think in the 2000s, that's when the .com happened, right? Web World Wide Web was come along. And that on top of that is where all the businesses were built. Initial software tech businesses. Both of which were obviously happening in Silicon Valley. So our best talent, like you said, a lot of it, not all of it, started moving there. But if you see in 2020, a lot of it, and pandemic was, obviously a one-off event, but a lot of them also started coming back. You see a lot of these, so-called US returnees who were kind of trying to build what they learned from their journey back in India. And their intent was to see, hey, how can I contribute to the fastest growing economy? Because if the growth is there, I've learned what I've had to learn, I'll come back and build it here. So even today in the world of AI, I think those cycles will repeat. And today these cycles have shortened significantly. So I think, while there is going to be talent going out, there's also talent coming back. And today's India is very different from that India. Today, every global large tech company has a GCC here, or a center here, a data center, or a tech center, a back-end tech center, because of which India has also become one of the largest pools of STEM engineers. And because we have so many engineers, we don't need AI researchers, we need AI engineers, and just upskilling will create a powerhouse here. So I think all we need to do, and to answer your question, is just upskill our engineers and our talent in India. And I think
You feel that we are actually on the right path, or are we missing something out? Or
no, I think there's a lot of change. Like today, education might not need institutions to, sort of permeate through groups. Self-education today is completely possible, unlike
Sure.
what it was 5 years back.
Absolutely.
Especially in these specialized categories like in AI or in healthcare, because of AI itself. I think so. A lot of engineers are actually on their own just upskilling. And we don't know it, but we'll see this collective power play out in the next couple of years as they take certain positions and implement what they've learned. And then we see that force multiply when larger groups come together.
Sure.
So I think it'll happen. I think we're on the
But
right
it's very
path.
interesting that you mentioned this, Vishnu, because I mean, you as an investor, or for that matter, when you look at somebody who's coming in, you talked about institutional education, and it's not like that is something which is like a pillar for you, or it's a foundational thing, which
Yeah.
is very, very interesting,
Yeah.
because it can be very, very inspiring for a lot of the people who will be watching this, in terms of the
Absolutely.
fact that they have a shot.
Yeah. All I'm saying is, of course, an engineer from Stanford who's worked at Google is going to be amazing. But there's no reason why someone who's not done any of those things today can't be just as amazing, because they have alternate paths to build those same capabilities.
What's that one little thing that you said no to, which everyone else was saying yes to, and it has paid off, and it brings still a smile to your face? And I'm sure you're not
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
rub
yeah.
it in by saying, see, I told you so.
Yeah.
But whenever you think back and you're like,
Yeah.
it helps in the playbook.
I think back when I was in B school, like even today it is, the biggest shiny objects are these brands, like what Google is to developers.
Sure.
For B schools, it's certain types of jobs, consulting, investment banking.
Correct.
All of these I really looked up to, and I did too. And a large part of me wanted to go there. And I think it's that same underdog attitude where I don't think I got into the best ones, but I still had some options. But then I recalibrated and said, hey, let's try something new. I packed my bags, came to Bangalore. This is 2018 and 17, 18. And there were all of these amazing founders starting up super early. And I was like, maybe let's join them. And that was a bit of a contrarian opinion, because honestly, for a guy coming from Bombay, since you're from there, I have no idea about, how tech has been built in Bangalore. It's
Sure.
very different, the innovation. And especially for me, Razorpay, B2B payments, infra was not very intuitive. But I could definitely see the amazing people and broadly some macros in the markets. And I felt like
What
that's
was
a
the
bit of a
family like?
contrarian.
What was their take in terms of?
They still don't know what I do. It's just the same, because they're doctors, and for them, I'm doing something in tech. But yeah, I think they've come to appreciate, because honestly now, Razorpay is really recognized, and I think that's been
Really?
something
We didn't know.
So I think that's changed. Now they know he's tech in Razorpay. So yeah, that's like,
AI. Let's get back to that. The way it is changing. What are your thoughts as far as the Indian AI mission is concerned?
look, I feel we're all said and done one of the largest and fastest growing economies in the world, and one of the reasons we're there is because we're solving for ourselves, for our scale, just our unique scale as India, as our population. And it's because of manufacturing, services, consumption. And that's what's put us on this path. Now, in the tech equivalent of that, what could we do, right? Let's give it a think. When we think of businesses and business models, everything has a value chain. So if you think of the motor engine, there was a lot of innovation and R&D and capex that went into building an engine. But it's not the engine that monetized itself.
Sure.
It was actually car brands that made a car around it, and then really built a large business outcome. I think in India, I don't know if we necessarily need to build the engine. We can just build a car around it. So what I mean is, let large companies like DeepSeek in China, OpenAI, and Claude spend hundreds of billions of dollars in fine-tuning and training their models. I'm sure our Indian techies are going to build, generational businesses on top of it when they're ready. And I think it's just a matter of time. So yeah, I think we need to just solve for ourselves, for our scale, and I think we'll continue on our path.
Fair enough. That's an interesting little take on it.
Yeah.
Let's get back to Razorpay, since we have not spoken about Razorpay at all. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'd love to understand from you, which is that what's that one acquisition that looked really, really great on paper, but actually taught you what not to do?
I'm wondering how many are there now. that,
Wow.
but I'm kidding. I think we've actually done a pretty good job in our M&A because I think we've been very thoughtful, and I'll tell you where that's come from. It's an instance like this. There was a time when we were very close to making an acquisition happen, and everything checked out. It was a phenomenal product, growing very fast, great founders, and we were like, let's do this. But then when we went into slightly deeper conversations about operating principles, core values, conflict resolution, how they go about roadmap building, we realized there was a lot of misalignment. Our approaches were very different, cultures were very different, people were different. And I think that's when it taught me that, it's not always about what is built, it's also how it's built. And the how usually talks about the approach, the culture, operating principles. And that's as important as anything else. So I think that's one we didn't do, but the biggest learning was that don't just look at product and market and business and people, but look at how they build. So dig deeper. And now we do a lot more founder one-on-ones, team one-on-ones, talk about how we operate, so they know it's a marriage, right? It's not, it's
Sure,
two-sided.
sure.
So, and then we identify whether this can work out or not. Because I think acquisitions are not P&L and revenue integrations. They are almost aligning beliefs. And an interesting stat to that is, in AI, the largest acquisitions are actually not revenue or product, it's people. I don't know if you've been hearing, OpenAI spent $6 billion on hiring Johnny Ive. It's, it's his company and all, but it's him.
Correct.
Same with Google and Windsurf, which is $2 billion for their CEO, or Meta for Scale AI. So all of these companies are actually hiring people because it's people at the end who build out what comes after an acquisition. So.
As far as this conversation is concerned, Vishnu, where we talk about the startups as far as our country is concerned, or our overall ecosystem, do you believe that somewhere we tend to celebrate the founder, or we celebrate the situation maybe a little too prematurely because we are very excited about the idea of unicorns, and we are not understanding that there is also a darker side to it, where there are so many startups which are unfortunately failing or shutting down, etc. And are we building unicorns on the ashes of those startups?
At the heart of it, I'd argue it's net positive.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. 15 years back, when I saw, or if anyone left their jobs wanting to start out, they would not be called founders, they'd be called jobless, right?
True,
because,
which is true.
So no one would really recognize what does starting up mean. But today, because of a lot of those successful founders, calibration of that success aside, there's recognition of entrepreneurship. Families are watching Shark Tank together.
Nice.
We ran a IPL TV campaign last season, and for Razorpay's brand campaign.
Sure.
And we didn't put our products out there. We didn't put actors or influencers out there. We actually put our customers, the founders, out there on TV.
Nice.
And that was appreciated deeply by everyone in the ecosystem. So I think, honestly, we do need to celebrate founders and startups a lot more. We maybe should celebrate even failures, and maybe sometimes product market fit, and not just fundraisers, and that I agree to. But net, I think it's been super positive.
So you believe that there is a sense of an identity, or a sense of a respect?
Absolutely.
And all of that you've seen has changed humongously over a period of time, which is what is actually driving this?
Absolutely. If you look at US, biggest influencers beyond like our Bollywood equivalent, which is Hollywood there, is not just that. It's actually an Elon Musk. It's a Mark Zuckerberg. It's Jeff Bezos. And these are entrepreneurs. So these are the most influential icons. And I think India needs more. We have our own, but we need even more. And at the end of the day, when that happens and this mind shift happens, it brings talent, capital, and ambition together. And honestly, that gives the permission for young engineers and business people to actually start out on their own.
You've obviously worked with 400 plus founders, and I'm sure it's growing. And since you're talking about this entire aspect echoing, that there is a sense of respect, there is a sense of, but be honest, is it that a lot of them just are getting onto the rat race, are just being a part of it. How many of them actually know what is it that they need to achieve, or what is it that they need to do? Is it something just is becoming just like a fad?
Yeah.
And okay, fine, let's become a founder.
Look, a founder is basically a role an individual plays who believes that they're taking a bet on themselves to solve a unique problem and solve it on their own. And that's why they are the founder, as the word says. It's not very different as a role they'd play if they want to take a bet on themselves in some other part of their life, that is, as a father or a husband, or in their professional life as a job. You want to be a techie, you want to move to marketing. So it's a role. A lot of people don't know what that role is till they try it out. So honestly, I see no harm in people trying it out. In fact, that just gives people a reality and a sense check on what that role means for them. I think the problem that you're might be referring to is when some of these founders also then raise money.
Yes.
And so I think that calibration, I think the market in itself kind of corrects for. So there are enough market forces that constantly educate, acknowledge, and share from war stories, from failures, from successes with the larger ecosystem, which is new founders, potential founders, investors, and it's done by communities like this and more, so that that calibration happens without having to play the role in itself. So I think it's a balancing act. I think a lot more people coming in is great, but calibration of that is also required. And I think the market kind of ends up doing it. That having said, I think most founders who come with a unique insight, I think there's never a downside for more.
That's interesting. That's genuinely interesting, because the fact that you feel that finally at the end of it all, and I think it just goes back to the point that you made earlier, which was a founder actually telling you about the fact that don't invest in my idea, actually invest in my grit.
Yeah.
So you feel that the community, the way it is forming and the way it's building and all of these aspects, is something which might just change the landscape in the near future, with AI complementing the overall situation. From the side where you sit on the side of the table, Vishnu, which is, do you feel that you mentioned that families are hopefully investing now, there will be a lot more funds available vis-a-vis 10 years back, etc. Do you see the change in the VC's mindset as well because of the build-up of this community? I'd like for you to maybe shine some light on that aspect.
No, absolutely. I think that there is a lot happening, and every year you will see new change. Look, at the heart of it, even VCs who are starting out are actually founders. They are just founders of an investment business. So people are constantly trying to reinvent themselves and innovate, whether they are the ones, and everyone is raising money, right? Even VCs have to raise money from someone to deploy it. So in their journey of either raising, deploying, once they deploy, how much they deploy, how they work with founders, constant innovation you can see across the board. You have today angel platforms where you and I can just go to a platform, sign up, and invest in a startup because the platform has enabled you to. That's like a genuine innovation. So a lot of these innovations happening across the chain. I think it's a large function of the community first having awareness of what can potentially happen. So the potential, the opportunity, and then experimenting what are ways to tap that potential, whether it's to invest in startup, whether it's founders, attacking actual problem statements. And I think because of the shared learning, shared goals, and typically some shared values, the community helps, each of its participants to become much better versions of them having done it alone. And I think that's really playing out in India and the broader entrepreneurship community. And I think that's been across all. If you go back in the day, like 100 years back, I think there were weavers and communities of weavers who came together and built something, or manufacturers or traders. Today it's this.
You said net. What is it that finally actually drives the understanding of the VC community, for example, from the perspective of the appetite? I want to understand that mindset, the appetite, because there are a lot of failures. Yes, there would be a few unicorns, which would be wonderful. Which I'm hoping that everything is a unicorn, which I'm sure would be your little
dream
thing that you manifest every day that you write. But from the appetite perspective, how do you see those things changing, or for that matter, for better or for worse?
Yeah. No, look, I think venture capital in itself, by definition, is a super high risk business. When you invest in a stock today in the public markets, your expectation is, okay, you put 100 rupees. If it's a blue chip, maybe it'll go to 120, or maybe it'll go to 80. Broadly, you're playing in that range, right? Maybe it's a small cap, you'll be like maybe 50 to 150, or mid cap 50 to 150. Maybe small cap, something, it'll 20. Venture capital, is it going to zero? In most cases, if you pick 10 stocks, mostly all 10 are going to zero. It's not in one stock. So that's the risk appetite, right, of venture capital in itself, which is A, each individual bet is super risky, and B, across all the bets you make, majority are going to fail. So that put together is the broad equation of venture capital. So inherently, there's already a lot of risk appetite that has to be paleted by most of these individuals who are investing. And the only difference is how much of an appetite do you have? So that boils down to how much can you invest in quantum? What's the timing? Can you do it before there are revenues by building conviction? Can you find the right signals and then, take contrarian bets, especially in absolutely new business models? Example, who thought that you will get your iPhone in 10 minutes today on quick commerce, right? No one would have imagined that like 10 years back or even 5 years back. No one would have imagined that. So that's a bet though a VC took and multiple took on multiple players, and they're all there. So like that, I think there is appetite. Of course, can that increase? It should, and it will, as the economy grows and as more capital comes in. People actually invest because back in the day, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala used to invest. So let's say I'll put in money because I know a big guy is putting money. This is likely going to work out. So that mindset is there. There are a lot of people who are taking deep, long, doing deep analysis on companies and taking long only positions, and sometimes they're taking contrarian ones when they do it in small cap or mid cap. Both those happen, and both are investors and legitimate investors. Similarly, I think in the VC world, they both exist, although the ideal contribution of the latter should be much more, because in venture capital, you're inherently taking more risk. But unfortunately, at the same time, there's always going to be a lot more founders compared to investors, and a lot less capital as compared to number of business models that need to be funded. The third thing I'd like to make, and I'll bring it all together, is that not every business needs venture funding.
Interesting.
If you go again 100 years back, a trader never needed any money. They just bought and sold. Maybe they take a small bank loan. Maybe their family would borrow something. But that business never needed money, right? They eventually built a business, generated profits, use that money to go up or down the value chain. So a lot of businesses today just don't need money, and that's even more so with AI. Just, get a $20 license for a month or 2 months for one of these tools, and you have the power of 10 engineers. So that's the last reason. And if you put it all together, you'll realize that a lot of times people might assume they need capital to build it out. But if pushed to the wall, they'll find ways to build it out anyway.
Nice.
And I think that's the unfortunate rules of the game that, I think founders who will thrive and survive are the ones who go through it and build it out anyway. Those are the guys anyway who are the ones who are meant to do it versus others might not. So yeah.
If Razorpay were to build an AI agent, what's that one problem or one thing that it'll like to go ahead and attack?
Payments. It's the only thing we know. I mean, we do a lot more, but look, we're fintech guys, and we believe that when your human behavior is changing so much with AI, eventually payments will as well. So building an automation for AI agents to make payments on your behalf, I think is something we'd like to build. And fun fact, we already launched it. There's something called Razorpay MCP, where you can connect your AI agents and then automate some of this.
Nice. You had mentioned a while back, Vishnu, you talked about the Llama Club perspective. How is that entire community or that entire aspect been for you as far as your experience is concerned? And also, do you feel moving forward, something like that can actually go ahead and benefit so many?
100%. Look, I think communities at the heart of it are built well when each individual can relate to other members of that community, and there is a fair bit of a common theme. So there's some homogeneity amongst community members, which brings that community together and unifies them, and then drives shared learnings. You can't have absolutely different individuals doing different things in a community tied in just by, let's say, a brand. What Llama Club and I think a bunch of others are doing well is really calibrating and filtering who are the right members of a community like in this case, maybe an AI founder who has already built a product, who has got some early customers, and now getting that group of AI founders together. So not someone who's at idea stage, not someone who's made 30 million in revenue, but this cohort. And this is the cohort that needs the most help, because that's why failure rate is the highest, right? And I think that kind of curated community building is definitely going to help, especially in areas where either there's a lot of noise, like in AI, or there's just absence of people. People are all over. You need to get even the small group together. And in some ways, it's doing both. So, yeah.
Vishnu, correct me if I'm wrong. You deal on a daily basis with insane amounts of fear. Others, right? There is a lot of that energy which you are always dealing with.
Yeah.
What are yours?
My biggest fear is that I won't be able to grow as fast as I did in the last 10 years. I think.
Wow. Why is that?
Because it's the case for everybody. Everybody in their school is learning, in their college is learning more, in their jobs early on is learning. Mid-jobs, part learning, part teaching. And by the end of it, everyone wants to teach. Most people who are late in their career, it's mostly advising others, right? I think today, the world, the way it's evolving, if you aren't constantly learning as much as you were 10 years back, if not even more given where we're at, I don't know if you'll be able to, or if I'll be able to, match my ambitions, even being an underdog. So I think that's my biggest fear. And I think that should be a lot of other people's fears who aim very high. And yeah, I work towards it every day.
It's been very interesting in terms of the fact that since you and I have been having this conversation for some time now, I see a lot of clarity in terms of the way you go ahead and you structure a thought and then you put it together, etc., all of that. Tell me this, how much of a spiritual, for that matter, understanding has assisted in building that mechanism in you? Because obviously it is going to go ahead and have some ramification on a lot of the things that you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. No, look, I think if I'm not wrong, it was Virat Kohli who said this after a massive win, that, when someone asked him, how are you here, where you are here, or how did this happen? I think it was A, B, C, D, but the biggest one, which was E, is luck, right? And I genuinely think that luck is luck, but often you can work towards building as much of it on your side as you can by taking certain steps towards it. So for me, I think whether you call it faith, luck, spirituality, a higher order, which you don't have absolute control over, and often you want it to work in your way.
Control over
you never
that,
have
no,
it.
Vishnu?
But you hope that it works in your favor.
And it's fascinating that you are such a brilliant entrepreneur who's done wonderfully well for himself, touch wood, and you're working in an environment where you need complete control. That's
yeah. So it's tricky, and so I think it's a little bit of just manifesting, just all of the stuff you've learned on a daily basis to just get what you want and hope that your stars align on a daily basis. And on most days they won't, but on some they will, and I think those are the happy days.
nice, wonderfully put. Thank you so much, Vishnu. It's been a true pleasure. And all I have to say is, me having this conversation with you has given me something very interesting as an insight, which is the fact that the aspect of going ahead, embracing your gut, finding a sense of being the underdog, celebrating a failure, living with your fear, and then obviously going ahead and traveling through all of that is a journey which I am, of course, very hopeful that is going to turn out beautifully well while you go forward.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
But truly a lovely conversation.
Likewise.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.